Week 10 of the fantasy football season is here, and it's time to set those winning lineups. I'm Jen Piacenti with Sports Illustrated, and to help you start and win your fantasy football leagues this Sunday, we've brought in Sports Illustrated's senior fantasy analyst, Michael Fabiano. Fabs, I'm going to ask you about each position so I can absolutely dominate this Sunday, because it's getting down to the wire. Like, I have to make the playoffs in quite a few leagues, and I'm hoping you can help me do it. First off, who are you starting at the QB position?
Well, I'll do my best, Jen. I'll start off with Matthew Stafford. And last week, I mean, he had a stinker. I mean, it was bad. 13 points against the Titans of all teams, right? But I would keep the faith. I like the matchup this week against San Francisco. Their defense has allowed 6 quarterbacks to score 19-plus fantasy points, including 5 with over 20, and 2 of them went over 25 points. So start Stafford, and I like Carson Wentz too. I mean, he has been playing very well over the last month or so. He's thrown for multiple touchdowns in 6 straight games. During that time, he's averaging 20 points a game. He's got the Jaguars this week. Now, I get it. They held Josh Allen to 9.6 fantasy points last week, but I feel like that was one of those illusions. Let's put it that way. This is a good matchup for Carson Wentz. I'd start him. I also like Aaron Rodgers. Now, assuming he comes back from COVID-19, we'll find out on Saturday. And Derek Carr is a good play against the Chiefs.
I absolutely love those starts. I'm starting all of those guys in various lineups, so let's go. And who are you going to sit this week at the QB position?
And of course, this is traditional one quarterback leagues. Ryan Tannehill, he's been up and down all season long, but he's failed to break the 15-point mark in his first game without Derrick Henry, and I think that's notable. And when you also look at the numbers, he's failed to score 19 fantasy points in 4 of his last 6 games. The Saints did give it up to Matt Ryan last week, but still, they are a defense that's been very tough on quarterbacks. They've held all but 3 to fewer than 19 points. I'm also sitting Baker Mayfield, who actually had a good game last week, but he still scored fewer than 17 fantasy points. Baker is just not a fantasy points maker. Let's put it that way. In a run-based offense, this is a bad matchup as well. Against the New England Patriots, their defense has allowed the second fewest fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. I'm also sitting Teddy Bridgewater after his great performance against our beloved Dallas Cowboys, and Jimmy Garoppolo is a fade for me as well.
All right, let's head over to the running back position. There's a certain running back you like that had a massive game on Sunday. I had him in 2 lineups, including DFS, and it was bonkers for me. You think he does the same thing this weekend?
I don't know about that, but everyone's going to be on James Conner. I mean, he's got 11 touchdowns, right? We all kind of buried him when he went to Arizona, but he's been tremendous. Had a massive game last week. And now the Cardinals are going to be without Chase Edmonds, which means he will be the starter and see close to a featured role. I think you'll see Benjamin in there as well. And it's not even about the matchup here, Jen. It's about volume and red zone opportunities. So start James Conner and start Melvin Gordon against the Eagles. I know he continues to share the workload with Javonte Williams, but he's putting up good numbers, right? In fact, he scored 17-plus points in each of his last 2 games. He's found the end zone 4 times since week 7. The Eagles have not been good against running backs, so in a week with 4 teams on a bye and running backs injured all over the place, Melvin Gordon is a nice RB2 flex.
Yeah, you also like Josh Jacobs versus Kansas City and Devin Singletary, who, they may be without Zach Moss this weekend. So Devin Singletary versus the Jets, that's someone that could even be available on the waiver wire if you need to stream a running back this week due to bye weeks. All right, who are we definitely sitting at the running back position? I know you have one guy that a lot of people took in the first round.
Right, and keep in mind, folks, again, 4 teams on a bye and a lot of injuries to running backs. But I'm not going to come out here and tell you to sit third stringers, all right? I am going to give you something to think about. And Antonio Gibson, who is coming off a bye, so maybe he feels a little bit better, maybe a little healthier. He has that stress fracture in his shin. But look at his numbers. I mean, he's failed to score more than 8.4 fantasy points in 3 straight games. During that time, he has seen his touch share dip to under 30%. In his last game, he lost work to J.D. McKissic and Jarrett Patterson as well. And then you've got the Buccaneers defense, which has allowed only 1 running back to rush for more than 67 yards against them. That was Khalil Herbert. So you're probably starting Gibson. I would temper expectations. Same kind of thing with Elijah Mitchell. Now, he continues to get a ton of volume, which means you're probably starting him as an RB2 or a flex. But this is not a great matchup against the Rams. Their defense has held the likes of Jonathan Taylor and Leonard Fournette to fewer than 6.5 fantasy points this season. and enemy running backs have averaged just 79.9 rushing yards per game against them. So again, you've probably got to start Gibson. You've probably got to start Mitchell. Temper expectations. I also don't love the matchups for Myles Gaskin and Michael Carter. In PPR leagues, you're probably playing them. In standard, well, they are not as attractive.
I'm with you on Antonio Gibson. If I have the option to sit him, I'm going to. I mean, J.D. McKissic is essentially operating as the #2 receiver in Washington, and that Tampa Bay run defense is difficult. So, yeah, I like McKissic better than Gibson this week, as strange as that is to say. And as you mentioned, it is Myles Gaskin's off week. That's how we predict Myles Gaskin here. It's on week, off week. It's definitely off week. Though I will say there is a possibility that he could just punch one in because they do allow a lot of touchdowns, but you won't get much else from Myles Gaskin this week. So if you have the luxury to sit him, definitely do that. All right, let's head over to the wideout position. You are starting a Colts wide receiver this week and a Chargers wide receiver this week that I have in our SI Invitational League matchup versus Bill Enright, and I need to knock him off his throne. So give me the good news.
Michael Pittman Jr. has become a virtual must-start. He's been really good. I mean, he's been a star in recent weeks. 17-plus fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games, including 2 with over 20 points. He's got a great matchup against the Jaguars, right? Their defense has allowed 8 different wide receivers to score at least 16.2 points. So Pittman is a virtual must-start. And I'm starting Mike Williams, and I know he's been bad lately. I mean, he's failed to score more than 7.8 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games after a really hot start. But the Vikings defense could be the elixir to helping him in terms of his statistical woes. Their defense has allowed the 7th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, and 6 receivers have gone over 100 receiving yards against them. So keep the faith in Mike Williams. I also like Hunter Renfrow this week, and Cole Beasley, who's been a targets machine since Dawson Knox has been out.
Fantastic picks there. Now, at the wideout position, there's also a few that you're going to sit, and you always help us with the really tough decisions, and a couple of these guys are going to be hard to sit, but, you know, Fabs, I think you're spot on.
Yeah, the matchup's not great for Courtland Sutton, and his numbers have not been good. I mean, he has scored a combined 21.7 fantasy points in his last 3 games. He's got a bad matchup this week against the Eagles and Darius Slay. That's never a good thing for a wide receiver. Jerry Jeudy is back. He looked good last week. Noah Fant could be back this week as well. So Sutton's a guy that I would beware. And I'd also beware DJ Moore. Listen, man, he needs more good targets, and he hasn't been getting them from Sam Darnold. And now Darnold's going to be out, which means PJ Walker will be the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. That's not good. You know what else isn't good? The matchup this week against the Cardinals. I mean, you look at the numbers, they've allowed just 22.1 fantasy points per game to wide receivers lined out wide, and that's where DJ Moore runs most of his routes. Folks, DJ Moore is probably a guy you have to play, but I do not expect a big stat line. Same thing goes with Julio Jones, who actually got through a game last week without getting hurt. I still don't trust him. And if DeAndre Hopkins and A.J. Green are back this week, I would fade Christian Kirk. Keep tabs on the status of both of his teammates moving forward.
All right, I love it. All right, let's go to the tight end position. This is the position that makes us pull our hair out every single week, but Fabs, you have been spot on every single week. So I'm going back to you here. Who do I feel comfortable starting at the tight end position?
Dalton Schultz of our beloved Dallas Cowboys going up against the Atlanta Falcons. He scored just 9.4 fantasy points last week, but he had produced 12-plus points in 4 of his previous 5 games. He's got a nice floor. I mean, he's always going to give you a minimum 9-10 points, and that's pretty good from the tight end position in this day and age of fantasy football. Atlanta's defense has allowed 14-plus fantasy points to all 3 of the fantasy-relevant tight ends they've faced this year, so that's good news. I'm also starting Dan Arnold. I mean, he's a targets hog all of a sudden, right? Mm-hmm. He's ranked tied for 6th among tight ends in targets since week 6. He's also scored 10 or more fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. The Colts have allowed 4 tight ends to score at least 10 points against them in their last 5 games. So Dan Arnold is suddenly on the fantasy radar as a guy that you can start with a pretty good amount of confidence. I'm also starting maybe the hottest tight end in fantasy football, Pat Freiermuth, the rookie. Who's better, Pitts or Freiermuth? Lately, it's been the Penn State product. And Noah Fant, if he comes back this week, the matchup's good against the Eagles.
You know, the best thing about those 4 tight ends that you just mentioned is half of them are widely available on the waiver wire. So if you need a tight end just for this week, or you just want to have some backups there, Freiermuth and Arnold available in like 80% of leagues. Last I checked 2 days ago, maybe it's a little less. A few people had waivers run already, but go check those guys out. I don't think you should leave them on the wire. I think they're going to be fairly safe for the rest of the season. All right, finally, who are we sitting at tight end if we have the luxury?
Right, and Hunter Henry's been good. I mean, he scored a touchdown in 5 of his last 6 games, right? So how do you sit him? Well, if you don't have depth at the position, then you got to roll with him. But let's look at the matchup this week against the Cleveland Browns. Their defense has allowed just 4 touchdowns to tight ends, and only 2 tight ends have scored more than 12.9 fantasy points against them. I think that's going to be a low-scoring game at Gillette Stadium. And then Tyler Higbee, and I was 100% wrong about him last week against Tennessee, but I didn't predict the game script that the Rams had to follow. They were getting beaten the entire game by Tennessee, which means Higbee saw a lot of targets. In fact, he had 10. I do not expect the same scenario against the 49ers. I think the Rams will be ahead in this game. They'll be running the ball in the second half, not throwing it, trying to erase a deficit. And the Niners have also held tight ends in check for the most part this season, allowing just 3 touchdowns to the position. Jared Cook, who is now in a tight end committee in Los Angeles, and Austin Hooper also should be on your bench.
Fantastic recommendations as always. And for all of you out there, if you want all of Fabiano's recommendations, and listen, this was only just a brief preview. He goes deep. Go find us at si.com/fantasy. You will get stardom and situms for every single position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, defense, and even kicker. But better yet, hit that subscribe button right now and get every single stardom sitting video we release each week, as well as our waiver wire pickups that I send out every week right here, si.com.